This is finally block 1 of Frosty.
Yay!
And this has so many trial and error things on it. I want to discuss some of them. One of them is, what Fusible do I use? So we're going to cover my trials and tribulations of Fusible because I tried 4 different ones on this sample.
Okay.
The other thing we're going to talk about is the stabilizer. This has all been cut on the Cricut.
Okay.
It's all been machine embroidered. So none of this, I don't know if we can get a close-up, it's all blanket stitched. Even the little decals they gave us, which, by the way, we have some different decals to show off, but I didn't put them on here yet. Yes, it's all machine done in the hoop.
And if you do want to do Frosty, the actual instructions are for hand applique.
They are.
So you can still do that if you want.
You can, and we can still cut it. We can still cut your pieces on the Cricut. You don't have to put adhesive on them if you don't want to, but I would if I was doing a blanket stitch, just so I don't have fraying edges. The other thing is, if you want to do a needle turned applique, you get all the patterns in your thing. You can do as much by hand as you want.
Yeah.
So this is with a 9.5 by 14 hoop, which is like Dream
Machine and above, yes.
Yeah.
Or a Stellaire.
Yeah, Stellaire will do it. This was 4 hoopings, including the quilting. And what I did with the quilting, if you like this quilt, the background quilting that you see is unique to Kimberbell's blue tiles.
Yes.
If you bought blue tiles, this is the winter quilting pattern that you got in the blue tiles. That's the only way you can get this pattern. But it doesn't mean you have to do the background quilting. You can choose not to do the background quilting. I wanted to do the background quilting because I think it dressed up the scene a little bit better. And what I used for batting, after much to do, was Kimberbell's project batting. And the reason I recommend that is it is so thin. It's very thin. See how thin that is? And I'm going to add a big piece of batting to the quilt when it's done. So, which led me to my other discovery. This is not trimmed down or anything either. So, just so you know, this is my raw edge, my raw size. Turn it around, Becky. Okay, right? Is that what you're going to say to me? Turn it around, Becky? So all of this has been digitized for everybody, which is fun. But then came the stabilizer. I did not hoop my project. I floated my project. And so I needed a stabilizer in the hoop to anchor my project to.
Which wasn't the batting.
Which was not the batting.
Okay.
Question from Danny.
Why did you float it?
Because it's easier to line things up if I'm not hooping my big hunky piece of material.
Okay.
What we did was, actually, remember I told you it's 4 quadrants?
Yeah.
You put your stabilizer in your hoop, and the first thing it's going to do is stitch out placement lines.
Ooh.
Fancy.
Fancy. And when you see how this is done, in the beginning I have you mark out the whole square. And those become your placement lines. And then if it's like I'm lining up an eave to the roof, then I will mark just the top part of the house on the stabilizer. So you easily know where your thing is going to go. But if you don't float it, that's a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So for this project, because I'm blanking stitching, I don't want to be yanking with force against the blanket stitches. So I do not recommend the heavy-duty sticky back stabilizer. Over here, I used a clean and tear away.
Mm-hmm.
A very good clean tear away. And I stuck it down with Becky's favorite glue. I used a glue stick.
Okay.
I just used a fabric glue stick to temporarily stick it down. I liked that, except I liked how easy it was to get out. What I didn't like was I wanted to pin my fabric too, just to make sure it wasn't going to move. Tearaway is not pin friendly.
No.
I was saying some nasty words and going, I just worked it up. So you can't pin it, but you can glue it, and it got me through just fine. So then I said, well, now what, Becky? Something better? Yep. This top, both these top sections, which I love. Do you see any stabilizer?
No. Did
No.
you use the Fusible water soluble?
I did. It is so lightweight. It's usually recommended for like standing lace projects.
Yeah.
So I thought I won't be able to handle this project, but because I have the batting in there,
Yeah.
it was a no-brainer. And then I just soaked it. I literally just took the whole block and stuck it in the sink.
Okay.
You have to cut out extra, although there is a tearaway sticky back wash away. But you can use many different stabilizers, Brent. I also just used the tearaway.
And it came out fantastic.
And that is cheaper. So the good news is you can do whatever you want. It depends on what you want to do afterwards.
And how much work you...
I like just soaking it. And then it disappears. And I thought, wow. And it's nice. It's good. Anyway, so that's my stabilizer dilemmas.
Nice.
Now, let's talk about fusible dilemmas. Everything. So let's talk about Misty Fuse. And why I don't recommend Misty Fuse for this project.
Misty Fuse has kind of got a real niche use, I think.
And what niche would that be?
Art quilting.
Here's how Misty Fuse works for those people who don't know and why I'm not using it for this project. But you can, okay? It is a sheet of glue. Sorry, Ed, I don't know what I'm doing. A sheet of glue.
It's
Look at this.
basically Wonder Under without the wax paper.
It's a sheet of glue.
Yeah.
So you have to take parchment paper or an applique pressing sheet, and you have to stick this down, put this on that because you don't want it to stick to the applique sheet.
Yeah.
Then you have to put your fabric on here.
Mm-hmm.
Then you pull it off of your your parchment paper, and then you cut out your design.
Yeah.
Or you use 2 pieces of parchment paper to get the glue solidified. I mean, it's ridiculous. You cannot use this without parchment paper or an applique sheet.
Yeah.
And it to me, it's another step. And for this project, I don't think it finishes the edges good enough. So then I said, what's the closest thing to this? And you already said, probably Wonder Under.
Yes.
Right? Wonder Under is right here at 4 Pines. You
Yes,
have it in
Wonder Under
stock.
is one of those just old school staples that you just can't live without.
Here's what I don't like about Wonder Under.
Okay.
One is, it is very fine, but I like that. And when you do this project, I actually do the placement stitch in the same color as the blanket stitch, and sometimes I do the blanket stitch twice just because I really like the heavier look and the heavier thread. Didn't like my machine. My buildup is enough that I'm not worried about my edges. They're nicely built up. They look good. So I think, and you can see I've already washed mine.
Yeah.
They look great, right? No shrinkage, right? Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then you go to take this stuff off. First of all, this is a cold peel, people. And I mean cold, as in set it aside and do your cutting and come back in an hour. I still didn't like it because I'm like this, trying to get it off my edges.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pain in the buttinsky.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been scoring sticky back stabilizer.
Mm-hmm.
So you already know this? Well, I didn't.
These
So I
are
took
just
a
a few
pin.
things I picked up from my mother.
I
My
t-
mother used to show me
I
this.
took a pin and I went like that. And this is the next day, so it's plenty cool. And I'm like, no way. Are you kidding me? So this is now Wonder Under. Wonder Under is my biggest recommendation. It beat out Heat and Bond Lite, and it beat out Seam to Seam too, both of which are used in the sample quilt. Here's what I like about Seam to Seam. If you're going to cut this on your electronic machine, you're going to remove the paper from the backing before you put it on the mat because it will not stay on it. The backing will float, your fabric will be all over the place. So no matter what electronic cutting machine you're using, you remove this you stick it on your fabric, then remove the backing, stick it on your electronic cutting machine and cut. What is nice about Seam to Seam is for those people who like, the reason it comes with 2 sheets of paper is it's very sticky. See? What that is good for is people who like to place and be artsy-fartsy and place stuff here and there, and it kind of sticks a little bit but not completely, so you can move around and blah, blah, blah. This project is so layered you can't do that anyway. So that's what's good about this, but it is notoriously thicker than the Wonder Under. I mean, when you look at the back of the fabric, you see a glowing bunch of glue. Heat and Bond is very much like Seam Steam 2. Lite, by the way, always use Lite on these projects. The heavy stuff is really for when you're not going to sew at all. And
Yes.
it is heavy, so you don't want to use that. Heat and Bond is similar to Seam Steam 2, except it's not sticky. It has no pre-stick, so it only has one sheet of paper, not two. That's why Seam 2 has two sheets,
So
because
he-
it's naturally sticky.
So Heat and Bond is halfway between Wonder Under and Steam Seam?
When it's applied to the fabric, it's very much like the weight of Steam
Steam,
2, but it's not sticky. So I believe you have this in stock too.
Yes, I believe I do.
So it's boiled down to two that you actually have.
Oh, nice.
That I like. My favorite is Wonder Under. My next go would be the Heat and Bond Lite. So now I'm back to wanting to cut, at least for month one, cut people's fabric for their applique.
If they want it cut, yeah.
If they want it cut, because they got so much other stuff to learn. On month
Yep.
one, I'm going to be here 7 days. I'm like, let's break them
So
in
yeah,
slow.
so check out the schedule if you're interested in Frosty. Come join us because we have a few kits left.